this is the second part of the episode Love and Marriage, because we got a little carried away, didn't we?
We got into our celebration, and as one does when one is enjoying a drink or two, one talks a little bit more than we might. We didn't edit ourselves as much.
So here is the second part of Love and Marriage.
Enjoy! There's stuff about Geraldine's timing in this episode, where that sudden decision, where suddenly the attention is on you, rather than on the people you're ministering to.
Yeah, well, she obviously really, really likes Simon. And she's obviously putting a lot of weight on the fact that he's going to be at the rehearsal, because all of this is like getting ready for the rehearsal, which he said he wouldn't. The only thing that would stop him was wild dinosaurs, because he's keen to see her in action. And I'm like, oh, a bit smarmy. I get it, a bit smarmy. But then we get to the rehearsal, and he doesn't flippin' show.
No, and in defence of Geraldine in all of this, and her rash behaviour and her little bit craziness, I suspect she's probably feeling quite lonely at all this time. You know, one of her closest friends is getting married, and it's just constant wedding talk and chatter all of the time. And she's clearly someone who doesn't want to be single. She'd like to be in a relationship. She enjoys that. And so I have more sympathy for her suddenly going, well, I'm going to dye my hair blonde, because...
Definitely. And Alice has made it really clear. Like, she said it in previous episodes. You're not interesting anymore. I've got Hugo. And I think we've all experienced this, where someone who we're close to as a friend suddenly meets the love of their life, and you don't see them as much.
It's really, really tough. And to be honest, I know from my besties, like, I have been that person before being ordained and meeting the love of my life. Like, I think it's a very easy thing to do, isn't it, to become suddenly like all enticed and obsessed by someone and just forget the rest of the world, which so uncool. Really difficult to manage, but ultimately uncool.
And I know I'm also guilty of that as well. And it's a hard thing to do. But we see the blonde-haired,
We do.
beautiful Geraldine Granger.
Oh my gosh.
For the first time at the wedding rehearsal. And she walks in, doesn't make a comment about it, and everyone's there like, oh.
Because what I love about this scene, right, is that everybody's thinking it, but no one's saying it. Now, can I just share with you, I think I've had this experience, right? In my bridal preparations, someone said to me, Jenny, your arms look very, very white. You might want to consider fake tan, right? No!
No!
So I went to the adventure, guys. I went to have my very first fake tan.
Oh, Jenny!
Did.
How did you find it?
So first of all, it's definitely not for me. Second of all, the beautician was amazing. And actually, it turns out we had a few mutual friends, so that was quite funny. But you literally have to stand quite bare in a booth while someone sprays like a dark brown. So that was interesting. Anyway, so I did that. I came into church on Sunday, and I just had the feeling of how we see in this scene. Geraldine walks in, she's got bright blonde hair, and everyone is literally like this.
For the listeners, that was the shocked face.
Yeah, it was a shocked face. It was a little bit like, oh.
Doesn't quite work for listeners.
It doesn't work for audio.
Sorry about that.
Can we, at this moment, give a huge shout out? Dawn French has stopped dyeing her hair recently, and she looks so good, and it's so amazing. Great. And I'm so proud of her that she doesn't feel like she has to keep that kind of Vicar of Dibley, Geraldine, dark hair anymore.
Bob.
She looks amazing. There's no doubt about it.
Cool.
And you can just see when she's coming into the wedding rehearsal, everyone's thinking, oh, hello, bright blonde hair. No one mentions it, and the rehearsal just carries on, which I also quite love. Have you guys done a wedding rehearsal recently?
Yes. I really love wedding rehearsals because it's all the fun of a wedding with less of the perfection pressure. So it's okay if things go wrong and you have a joke with everyone. And for me, I see my role as simultaneously reading the riot act to people who need to hear the riot act. But you have a joke and you're trying to relieve pressure. But also you are practicing things. You're giving people time to work things out for themselves. Where do they need to stand, etc., etc. I tend to have them the day before. I do tend to always lose my day off when I'm doing a wedding. Because I do the wedding rehearsal the day before, which is usually my day off. But I do really enjoy doing them because it's a great time to spend with the party.
What do you mean by the riot act? I'm interested.
So the riot act is if there's someone who seems to be ready to play silly buggers, like often a groomsman. Often a groomsman. You tell them off. You say, look, it's your responsibility to make sure that the groom's here on time. You're not taking him out tonight to get him super, super drunk. He needs to have capacity to give consent tomorrow. Yeah. He needs to be here on time. You're not standing up to object, and we'll get to this a bit later. You just say, look, this is serious business. That's what I talk about when I talk about the riot act. That's what I mean. If someone looks like they're going, I've got a bit of a prank to play, you say, this is not the time.
Yeah, because there can be very serious legal and financial consequences.
Oh, absolutely.
Which I'm sure.
Which is why I warn them. If you know someone who's a bit of a joker, who's likely to stand up and say, I object, I will stop the wedding at that point. We'll go off and talk about it. You've got to.
There's no other option.
But
if you have a legitimate objection, which we'll talk about, that's fine. Like, please do that so I don't go to jail for marrying someone I shouldn't have. But actually, if you're doing it just for a bit of a laugh, no one will find it funny.
And I'm pretty sure we can hold someone financially liable if they make a false claim. Anyway, we'll get to that. Yeah. Ultimately, what we're saying is, this is serious. Yes, we can have fun, but I was going to say, to use Will Wheaton's adage, don't be a dick, but I don't know if we're allowed to say that.
I think it's solemn and serious, but it's also full of love, isn't it?
I want to share my Vicar of Dibley-esque story of a wedding rehearsal that I've been to. When I was a curate, I went to one of the churches that we were in partnership. It wasn't our church. But they had loads of weddings and we didn't have many weddings. And I went to observe, because they had so many weddings, they did rehearsals. They did a sort of an evening for all the wedding couples who would have weddings in a certain time period. And there would be champagne. And it was a bit of a production where there would be various people presenting and saying, this is what we're doing at this part of the service, etc., etc. I was the only single person there, and there was champagne. And as I was there, I just had this moment of, if I was ever the Vicar of Dibley, if I was in the Vicar of Dibley, this would be a plot line. Like, you got all the little check marks of, I'm single, everyone else is coupled off, I've been given alcohol, given the opportunity to speak.
You'd have too much champagne and fall in the font or something like that.
It didn't happen, but I had one of those moments where if there was a camera on me right now.
Oh, bless you. Too true. Yeah, too true. Too realistic for the Vicar of Dibley.
This is another scene in the Vicar of Dibley, the whole rehearsal scene, that I am convinced I've seen longer versions of compared to what I watched on iPlayer the other day. Because I'm sure that there's a whole scene with Frank talking about making sure people know that he's not really Alice's father and all this kind of stuff. Because you see that later on in the wedding, but I don't think it's talked about in this scene. But I am certain I have seen longer scenes with all of these different bits.
Is there bloopers that you might have seen, or is it a Mandela effect then?
No, like
they are the same.
A lengthened episode. So like the knowing me, knowing you scene, there's definitely a longer bit with that, and there's definitely more with this scene here, because
I do
the whole
agree.
Frank and his father thing.
Do you think maybe the DVDs are longer with this
Probably.
scene?
I think it's a Mandela effect thing. I think it's where we are amalgamating different aspects of different episodes together. Like, so I remember but knowing you as being like at the reception, and Alice and Hugo were actually hearing it, but it wasn't when I watched it back. But Ruthie, you're waving the sacred text.
I hear your Mandela effect, but in the script, which I have here, there is the extended scene with the adding the note into the order of service that Frank says, and there's a bit about no, Nanette.
Oh, no, Nanette.
Yeah. Is that in the... That wasn't in what I watched.
That's definitely in the DVDs. Definitely in the DVDs.
I need the DVDs.
It's a deleted scene or a blooper reel or an extended version.
I was definitely waiting for no, Nanette when I first heard Jim's speech. So
yeah, I think we all watch it on BBC iPlayer? So
correct.
Maybe BBC is.
We need to refer to the original.
Have we been watching the abridged version?
Yeah.
The kind of like TV edit version. I think we should encourage everyone to go back to the DVDs, frankly.
Because here, reading this, there's a bit about the wedding night. Hugo and Geraldine talk about the wedding night. I would have made a note about that if it was in the scene that I'd watched.
But, just
in the vestry afterwards.
Script doesn't mean it actually made it to edit. So producers might have decided to cut it for time.
Well, what's the wording? And maybe we'll recognise it.
Hugo comes in. Thanks for all that, Vicar. The wedding's going to be just fabuloso. And Geraldine says, yep. And wedding night, Hugo. And Hugo says, oh, absolutely. We've both packed hot water bottles.
Yes,
and I've got a brand new pair of Rupert Bear pyjamas.
Oh, Rupert Bear,
I've seen this.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah, this must be the slightly longer version of the DVDs.
Let's be honest. Alice and Hugo have anticipated their vows. We all know it. The amount of time they spent snogging.
Do you think so?
The amount of time they spent snogging. You think they haven't anticipated their vows?
What do you mean?
I don't think they've had sex before marriage.
That's very...
Is that what you're insinuating?
Yeah, that's very Regency language.
No.
It is very Regency.
I disagree. Although Alice does talk about hiding the purple parsnip with Geraldine, which is the only moment where I thought, I wonder if Alice has experienced hiding the purple parsnip. And then I thought, that's a weird thought, Jenny. Why have you thought that? And thought, don't know.
You see, I can imagine them having anticipated their vows, but not quite realising that
what they've done.
They have. Like, they got carried away and haven't realised that was...
I personally choose to believe that both of them have saved themselves for marriage. But I could be wrong.
But let's
know.
be clear, we're not...
Never know.
We're
not judging.
We're not judging. And every couple does it
It's not a salvation issue.
Absolutely not.
True say.
Let's move on. Let's not talk about Alice and Hugo's sex life any longer.
Wow.
He has taken a weird turn. I think we should all have a glass of water and then come back.
Our next scene, we're in the vestry, and Geraldine is preparing for Evensong.
Yes. So straight from a wedding rehearsal into Evensong. That's a.
What day are they getting married?
Okay,
Monday.
I'll tell you, there's clues from the hymns later on, but I'll let you know.
Oh, nerd cake coming out.
I got so geeky with it. Anyway,
so she's preparing for Evensong, and she's put on her surplice, which is like the white ghost-esque item.
She's got Jesus
outfit.
all down her front.
She's spilt wine everywhere, and we've all been there. I've definitely had to wash wine.
I would literally rather perish until I spilt the wine.
I've spilt wine.
Yeah.
I've done that, and it was I felt awful.
I've seen it done. In fact, actually, one of my ex-boyfriends. Actually, no, this is no. Okay.
It's one of my fears because I sometimes with my hypermobility with my joint, my perception of where my body isn't quite right. It's one of the side effects of my condition.
Interesting.
So I often will just clip the chalice sometimes as I'm preparing the table, and I know at some point I'm going to knock the chalice over.
Yeah.
But I haven't done it yet.
Do you know what? It's one of those things that I think about and I fear, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I take it so seriously. But when or if it was to happen that I would knock the cup or see it knocked, I would just be like, you know what, God knows our hearts and is so much bigger than this. But when I think of it, I'm like, oh no, makes me so
it
worried.
Just means there's more Jesus in the sanctuary.
But we're in the vestry scene, and she's had her surplice and it's dirty, and so she's going to clean it, and she's trying to take it off. And this is the point where Simon appears, walking so awkwardly with his coat wrapped around him. He looks silly, and we find the evidence of the wild dinosaurs that had kept him away was actually a queue on the motorway, and he discovers the blonde Geraldine underneath the surplice.
Yes, he reveals her, doesn't he, after she's accidentally tangled herself in her surplice. Have you ever done something like this before? I feel like I definitely have, but not to the extent where I couldn't solve it myself.
Yeah, I've been tangled in my robes before. I might have had someone help me. I probably could have gotten it out myself, but if there's someone on hand who can help you, you go to someone rather than fighting your robes. It's often when I've been somewhere that has a chasuble, I feel like when you've got that additional layer. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Chasuble is like a giant poncho that you wear on top for those.
Everyone.
What's interesting about this is that when she walks into church with her bright blonde hair, no one says anything. Yeah. But as soon as Simon reveals her bright blonde hair, he says, well, hello. And he straight away is like,
Well, he knows she's done it for him.
Yeah.
Of course he does. He said, I like blondes, busty blondes. And then she's dyed her hair blonde. He knows. Yeah. He knows. Yeah. He likes it.
And he invites her out.
He does, yes.
He invites her out on a date. And Geraldine says yes. And then Alice suddenly reminds her that it's a hen do tonight.
Yes!
And so she says, obviously, God hates me. And we head to the hen do.
Which is
literally a party of two.
But such a beautiful moment in their friendship. Yes. It's strange that Alice's sister isn't there.
That's true.
But it's beautiful.
Or her mum,
maybe. But, they're lovely. No mums at hen They're lovely together. My question is, have you ever been invited as a vicar, not as a friend, but as a vicar to a hen do? And would you like to be? If you were, would you say yes?
I invited my vicar to my hen do.
Hey!
Yeah, but that's because Jenny was your vicar.
To be honest, one of my brides said to me, would you want to come to my hen do? First of all, I would be quite surprised.
Yeah.
Second of all, I think I would probably decline unless I was a close friend. Or to be fair, if someone invited me, I probably would go. But it's never the place, I don't think, of the priest who will marry you to come along to your hen do.
Depends what you're doing.
It really depends. If they are having a quiet weekend in the countryside,
if it's a retreat
kind of retreat,
maybe.
Versus if they're going out to a strip club.
Definitely go in your colour.
Definitely, yeah.
To be fair, whatever you do, bring the peace and presence of Jesus into whatever you do. To be fair, there have been events that I've gone to in the past that have been risque, and I've thought, I wonder if I can do this and bring in and just represent the love of God in this situation. And it hasn't been a hen party, but it's been a party of kinds that I'm like, I wonder if I can go to this and just be God's person in amongst all of this. And actually, as a big, that's a whole life, isn't it, really? But to the hen do of a bride that I was marrying, I can't ever imagine being invited. I don't think my relationship with them is never that close, unless it's a friend I'm marrying. However, I have to say, next month, one of my very best friends in the whole world is getting married. And although I'm not going to be her vicar, I'm doing the talk at her wedding. And I'm also a bridesmaid. And I will also be at her hen do. So there are those moments in ministry where actually our worlds collide, which I do absolutely love. But it's a bit different, I suppose.
I did that with my sister-in-law.
Oh,
I was bridesmaid, preached, and helped with the hen do.
And I love how
that.
Geraldine embraces this, and she goes all out.
Yeah.
You know, she's
Yeah.
wearing
That outfit.
that outfit.
Yeah.
The nipple
Got little
tassels.
tassels.
Oh,
Booby t-shirt. Love it.
It feels
Fabulous.
like she sees an absence in Alice's life, and she is so happy to fill that. Like, in terms of, she sees that Alice doesn't have close female friends who are going to throw that last night of freedom party for her. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to do this. Because Alice sees her as a friend, even if Geraldine doesn't necessarily see her that intimately.
no, Geraldine sees her as a
Well, no,
friend.
she has a slightly parental relationship with Alice, let's face it.
Yeah, she does times.
It's mixed. So yeah.
But Geraldine would throw a cracking hen
we
do.
all know it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I would be there in a flash. Can you imagine?
Any
Yeah.
party Geraldine throws.
Yeah, so true.
Would be fantastic, and they seem to be doing pin the tail on the donkey, as we see later on in the scene, and other things. And I just, it's just lovely, and Geraldine's gone all out despite it just being the two of them there, and Alice is there in her bra and her suspender belt. It's very nice, and she's stuffed her bra with tissue.
That's really cute.
I know.
And she's like, oh, it's the best party I've ever been to. Geraldine's like, is it? Oh, I mean, yeah, me too. This is great.
Alice goes on
It's
to make
wild.
quite the revelation.
Oh, good grief. Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah.
Who wants to unpack this one? I mean, it's heavy.
Shall I?
Caitlin,
Yeah,
this is
let's
job-
face it.
this is
I've
job
done
for you.
some research. Let's be honest. Alice says, "Oh, you know, I think the reason Hugo and I are so close because David Horton is my father."
Yeah, she doesn't say that. She says it slightly differently. Because she doesn't say the word David.
She does say David Horton.
Mr. Horton.
She said Mr. Horton.
No, she does say David because it
I
is
think-
it is David Horton who is her father.
It
just
is
not
David
the one
Horton,
where-
but she says what she says. She says it isn't, because she's talking about the wedding party and how lovely it is that various people are doing different things, and that Frank's walking her down the aisle, and she says it's a shame that her father couldn't do that, but for obvious reasons he couldn't. Her shame that her real father, biological father, Mr. Horton, couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And Geraldine, you just see the panic in her eyes at that point.
And also the violin starts coming on.
Yeah, no, there's actual tension music played in the background. So, for those of you who don't know, and I hope everyone knows this, if you're too closely related to someone, you can't marry them. In the Church of England, there's something called the Table of Kindred and Affinity, and this is in the Book of Common Prayer. It's on the last page of a Book of Common Prayer, so it's easy to find.
Quick access.
Says, wherein whosoever are related are forbidden by the Church of England to marry together.
Which,
one may not marry their mother or their father or their daughter or their son, their father's parents, their mother's parents, their son's children, their daughter's children.
Agree.
Their siblings. Their father's children or their mother's children. Their parents' parents. Their parents' children. I'm sure we've already had that. Apparently there's different...
It's a long list.
It's a very long list. Essentially, anyone that your parent has been married to, your parents' parents' parents. Basically, don't marry anyone you're related to closely.
And
however,
because there was kind of quite a strong tradition of marrying cousins, wasn't there? Especially in the aristocracy, to keep bloodlines.
That is legal in the Church
pure,
of England.
Which is still technically legal, but
You wouldn't.
ill-advised, because actually there is still that shared blood there, isn't there? And there's more, if you have children, there's more danger of them inheriting diseases and that kind of thing. So, you know, don't marry your cousin, don't marry your sibling. And Geraldine has heard this from Alice and is thinking, holy moly, their brother and sister are about to get married.
For a full list, look
It's
at
true.
page 630 of a Book of Common Prayer. But
Let's turn to that now.
Geraldine should have already checked this.
Yeah, this would never happen.
I have to say, when I was watching this episode, I thought, lol, Caitlin. Because I knew, Kate, that you would bring up that actually you end up talking to your couples and you have to legally ask them at least like 2 or 3 times. First of all, is there any way that you could be related? And then at the wedding itself, is there any reason legally why you two cannot be married? Like, this definitely would have come up. So it's like, oh no, that it's coming up now. Obviously, it's created because of, you know, the juiciness for TV. But I was like, in real life vicaring, this would never happen, would it?
But yeah, so you would look at the document beforehand and you would write down your biological parents as part of that. But you wouldn't necessarily have their names on the marriage document afterwards, because that's changed now. And so actually, if you have a broken relationship with a parent, then you wouldn't necessarily want their name on a document, but perhaps you are closer with a step-parent or then their name can be on there. I think you can have up to 4 names per bride or groom, which is really, really lovely. And I think just says something about, well, family dynamics have changed, and actually those who have been parental figures for us might not be those who are our biological parents.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. So nowadays, this situation wouldn't occur then, would it?
Well, it wouldn't then. You'd know. Like, you'd have to write down who their parents are. And so I'm sure that when it came up that David Horton is Alice's biological father, then you would say,
there is
interesting.
a rare possibility that Alice's mother's husband went on the birth certificate.
Interesting.
And Geraldine may have seen that birth certificate as proof of identity and therefore not asked about parentage. Because that does happen, that can happen, where a non-biological parent is entered onto the birth certificate.
Is that allowed?
Well, it happens.
I think we might need to take a turn about the room on this one.
Nice throwback, Jenny.
It's got way too complicated for me.
So Geraldine has a moral dilemma, thinking nobody would know. She thinks, I've got to cancel the wedding because they're siblings and I can't marry them
until the children are born.
Yeah. With webbed feet
and fur and 8 legs.
And she's having this moral dilemma because clearly these two are meant for each other, but if they are biologically related, they cannot get married.
No.
And who appears at the door?
To save the day, might I add?
To save the day, Owen, which is the most surprising thing.
God love Owen.
And Geraldine shares this moral dilemma with Owen, which seems a bit bizarre that she would do that. And Owen's like, yeah, it's David Horton. And Geraldine's surprised. I'm like, has everyone gone insane? Like, this is not okay. And then we have the throwback to the beginning of the episode where they named the road after David Horton, who is not the David Horton we know, but the cousin's brother something. So kind of related, uncle, but not really related.
Yeah. Either way, not direct, not immediate relation to Hugo.
So they can get married.
They're still related.
All is well.
But anyway.
And then Geraldine suddenly realises that actually after all this worrying, she's probably going to be late to the actual wedding. So she's like, okay, great, thanks, Owen. Runs up the stairs, shaking her little tail as she goes, I think.
And clearly, what I liked about this is they've had an outfit change during the hen do, and she's gone from wearing her statue of David Dealey boppers to bunny ears and a bunny tail.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think Geraldine looks absolutely stunning in this scene. She's given me very Bridget Jones vibes. You know, when she wears the bunny ears, and she just looks beautiful. And actually, it's quite hard to pull off a very dark brown hair, and equally as well, a very bright blonde hair. Yet she manages it. Like Dawn French, you are beautiful.
That's
yes. Because Dawn French is an absolute superstar. There we go.
So true.
the last note I think we want to make before we move on to the wedding day, please do not have your hen do or your stag do the night before your wedding. That's a really bad idea.
Yes, definitely not to do that.
Because you're going to be tired, hungover, possibly
do people do that these days, do you think?
I don't think people do as much, but if you're getting married, don't go out for a wild night beforehand because you're going to be knackered for the day and you're exhausted during the day because it's really busy. But we have come to the day of the wedding. Dun, 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 dun.
Sorry, I kept it going.
I almost did the March of the Empire there from Star Wars. Throwback to a conversation we had before recording.
Yeah. Not an ideal entry song, but...
Anyway, the church looks beautiful.
It's so stunning, isn't it? With all the flowers everywhere. And I think this shows very well what it's like when it's a village wedding of a village family, 2 village families, and actually everyone in the community is really invested in their relationship and this wedding, and they've all come together to celebrate the day. But also there's just flowers everywhere and it's beautiful and it's just...
They've had that time. They know the building. They know how to make it look nice. They've had the time. They've gone in multiple times and had those ideas, and they've gone in multiple times in the week in advance, adding little bits. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I always ask my wedding families if we can have copies of the photos of the church, if they have them, because it's fantastic promo material to say this is how the church could look. Because sometimes churches can look a little bit... not horrible. Churches are always beautiful buildings, but to add that dream and fantasy factor... You know, suddenly people think, oh, this is a wonderful, wonderful venue.
But then we are blown away instead and we forget all about the venue because Alice appears in what a dress. No. It's not the red, white and blue one. It's not got hearts with the every Doctor Who in them. It's got a massive heart on it that says, I love Hugo.
Oh, does it? I didn't see that.
Yeah. And it's so big and full of frills, and she's got this incredible tiara, and it's just perfect for Alice. And it is a bit more kind of tamed back from what she was originally planning, but it's just perfectly Alice at the same time.
But
it's wonderful.
Then we have the bridesmaids. We've seen the compromise that Alice has made with her own dress. Then the bridesmaids, or bride's children, we can't really tell, come in, and they're Teletubbies, and it's just
they're dressed as the Teletubbies.
It's so wonderful, and we get cuts to some of the congregation, and there's such looks of being charmed. Like they're not laughing in, oh, look at this spectacle, this is hilarious, but oh, isn't this just lovely?
Agree, apart from David Horton, who is... So when he saw the sketch, he did the same reaction, literally almost the same kind of cadence as when the Vicar of Dibley, as when Geraldine first walked in. He goes, and I'm sorry to blaspheme, he goes, oh my God. The woman Vicar. And then he goes, oh my God, is this what Alice is wearing? And then you see him do that same kind of vibey feeling during the wedding where he covers his mouth and he's like, oh.
But that's a contrast, is he is worried about what other people will think, and he's made that clear. But everyone else is vibing. Like, and when we come to singing Spice Girls, everyone's enjoying it. Like, the wackiness of Alice is loved by everyone. And, you know, when I say this to my wedding couples for wedding parties, don't be worried about things going wrong. If you've got children in a wedding and you've got a child suddenly decides to run down the aisle or shout out that they object or whatever, ultimately people will be charmed by it and it will become a fond memory and a fond story.
Yeah. And this is another point where actually you see, if you have like good relationship with your vicar and you work together at the service, how crafted and beautiful it can be together, and weirdly the Spice Girls works for this. The two become one, and Cecil's giving it his all up there, isn't he, as leading the choir, and it's just wonderful as they have the first song, and Then we get to the scene where Geraldine asked the question that we always ask at weddings beforehand about if anyone knows any just cause or impediment why these two may not be married.
Yes, it is just cause.
You are to declare it.
Well, that's language we use even in common worship. It's not just Book of Common Prayer language.
Well, in my weddings, I would say if anyone here present knows any reason in law why these two persons made
that's true.
You are declaring now.
Correct.
So it's a very slight difference. But yeah, not
Let's talk about just cause or impediment.
Well, there is one here. We have a lady in peach who storms the building saying yes, and let him not deny it, for I have the wedding certificate to prove it. Now, this is, oh my goodness, red flags everywhere. This wedding has to be cancelled, has to be stopped. If there's a wedding certificate to prove the groom is already married, that is game over. Am I right?
That is a just cause. That is a reason to stop a wedding.
Yes.
If someone appears with a marriage certificate proving that one of the party has previously been married, yes, this would be legitimate. But there are other reasons why you could stop the wedding. Let me hand over to Kate in all her beautiful nerdiness.
So, based on what I was taught at college, I tend to say to people, because I try to make it a little bit of a joke with the couple, I try to say, it's very rare that anyone would ever make an objection. If they did, these were the reasons it could be. So, the ones I tend to give are, if you're too closely related, and I say, we've already checked that, you're not related. If you're already married, we've already checked that, you're not married. If you are absent without leave from the army. I'm not sure if that's true, but I was told that at college in a lecture, and I think it potentially might be.
AWOL.
There's something about nationality. If you are illegally in residence in the country, I believe you're not allowed to get married.
No, definitely not.
And then we have additional ones, which I tend not to say. Time of day. Legally, a marriage can only occur between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. It's supposed to be within...
It's 9 and 6 p.m.
It's supposed to be within daylight hours, but I checked the government guidance before, and they said 8 and 9. I think sometimes the sun doesn't set until 9, just as it is right now. We're recording in summer. So
why would you want a wedding at 8 a.m?
Yeah, I think it's 8 and 6, but it's
you'd be keen.
Church canon law. I think is daylight hours. Place where you're getting married. If you are not getting married in church, you need a special license, an archbishop's license. And
my mum and dad had one of those for their wedding.
Did they?
They had to get a license from the archbishop because the church that they got married in wasn't consecrated for weddings. Despite it being the family church that she'd gone to for years and years and years, it wasn't consecrated for weddings, so they got a special license for it.
Yeah.
Wow, why wouldn't it be consecrated for weddings?
It was like an old tin shack,
or if it's basically a chapel of ease sometimes, or I've known chapels which are on like estates, family chapels. You'd need an archbishop's license. If you haven't had your banns read, you need a common license to get married, which you have to pay for. Then one I include is I tend to tell my couple if you can't give consent. So that, for me, that includes if you're underage. So if you're under the age of 16. If you are inebriated in any sense of a word. Or if you are under duress. I say the most common objection that I know of, and it's still extremely rare, is that this is some sort of human trafficking issue.
Really good to remind people of, actually, because like you're saying it now, and I'm thinking, what a cause for us to pray against. And praise the Lord that actually these situations are so rare. But in the unique situation that they do come up, actually having clergy that are informed and can spot the signs is very important, right?
I remember an archdeacon talking to me about this, about weddings, and she said she thinks there's only 2 that have got by her as potentially false weddings. So she was living in a place where there was a large community of people who had emigrated from different places, some legally, some illegally, and she said that they were really thorough with their background checks of this, of who was allowed to reside in the country and all this kind of stuff. And she thinks that there was possibly one that might have got through because the photographer was so keen to take photos to prove that it was legal, and that was the one where she thought maybe this is a one. But the big people think you can object at weddings because you're in love with the bride or the groom or whoever it might be.
It's legal only.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so the big
only.
Hollywood moment, and that's what we have here, is this is how I say it at my rehearsals.
Yeah.
You can't just stand up and say, you can't marry them because I'm in love with the bride and groom and I want to run away with them both.
The bride.
That's how I phrase it, because I try to make it the biggest kind of.
Nice.
I'm trying to make it as light-hearted as possible and inclusive. Let's say that.
Yeah. You don't know which one they fancy.
You just can't do that. So what happens if someone does stand up and makes an objection?
Oh, it's my worst nightmare. Well, you have to stop the service.
Yeah.
You have to stop it, and you would take the objector and the bride and groom into a private room to discuss it and see what the objection is. And there would need to be an investigation if it's an objection that is relevant for this. So if someone's just go, oh, just did it for a laugh, actually, that is a really bad thing, which is why I always say at rehearsals, if you know someone's a bit of a joker, tell them it's a serious thing and don't do it because I will stop the wedding. And can you imagine going to that reception afterwards with everyone just looking daggers at you because you stopped the wedding? And you would need evidence, wouldn't you?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can ask whoever's lodged the objection to pledge to a bond, to agree to a bond. So that means they will be financially viable for their objection if they're wrong.
You're absolutely right, Caitlin. So if somebody objects and their claim is found to be disproved, they are kind of legally responsible to refund the entire wedding, which when you think about it,
that's a lot of money
really
nowadays.
adds up. Yeah.
Or at least that's what I believe we were told at college. I'm sure there will be someone who tells us, actually...
Probably your dad.
Probably
Kate.
My dad. I don't think he listens anymore, to be honest.
We'll see if any vicars are listening and can lead in. But no, definitely. And I say that to my couples. I think it's really important that they know that.
The first thing that I would do then is phone the archdeacon, who legally knows all the stuff that they need to know, and probably the diocesan registrar, who's the proper legal person, to talk through and go, this has happened, what the heck do I do? And try very hard at the same time not to poop my pants, because I would be so stressed out if this happened to me in real life.
I know, it would be really scary. If you're a vicar that's listening or you're in training and you're wondering what to do, actually that's a really good point, Ruthie, to call your area dean or archdeacon or
send it up.
Send it up. Send it on.
And I've heard stories of someone who's managed, because a couple didn't actually have their band certificate, managed to get a last minute common license because the registrar was a superstar. And ultimately, proper, actual objections for just cause or impediment are so rare. And if you do the correct preparation and you make sure that you do ask for proper questions beforehand, you shouldn't face these issues.
Definitely.
No. But it is my worst nightmare if that would ever happen. And this lady does have a legitimate reason to object, but then Hugo turns around to see this lady who has claimed to be his wife. And then she goes, oh, sorry, wrong church.
I mean, comedy gold this moment, let's face it. In terms of directing, like comedy
And
gold.
I was going to say how many St Barnabas churches in Dibley can there be, but I went to the wrong St Michael's Church. The other week. So I know sometimes in this fictional world there's apparently 2 Dibleys. Let's just
go with the flow. But poor Alice, she's fainted. She needs to be pulled
They
off
pick her
the floor.
off the floor.
Luckily, the lady who's making this claim is, bless her, trying to find another church. She leaves quite abruptly. Hugo is like, oh, he's shocked, but he's okay. Alice, bless her, is pulled up off the floor and they continue the wedding.
So, the woman who's come in, she does have a valid reason for objecting. However, it's not valid in this specific circumstance. Because
luckily.
She says, because the groom's already married to me and I have a wedding certificate to prove it. But then Hugo turns around. It's the wrong groom. She's in the wrong church. That's a whole thing.
So we can carry on the wedding.
We can carry on
and we
the
move
wedding.
on to the vows, which is a really lovely moment.
It is a lovely moment, but can I ask you guys something? I find whenever we're at a wedding rehearsal, sometimes on the wedding day, there is a part of the wedding vows which say, with my body I honour you, where the groom and the bride are supposed to repeat afterwards, with my body I honour you. And then it feeds into all that I have I share with you, and all that I am I give to you. It's beautiful. But do you guys find that you get giggles?
Hugo does
every
at this
single
bit.
time.
Oh, it's not this bit.
Massive giggles.
It's not this bit. It's in the preface, which you say at the very beginning about what marriage is about, and then it talks about the tenderness of sexual union.
Do you know what? I changed that. I changed that to bodily union.
I think that's an option.
Yeah, I changed that to tenderness and delight of bodily union instead of sexual. Because
I consult with a couple. I consult with a couple.
Interesting.
Because
legally we can't change that.
But I give the option for pastoral reasons. I ask about whether they want to include the bit about children. Because there are serious pastoral reasons where you may not wish to include the bit about marriage being for children.
Yes,
such as, we'll not get into them.
We're going to get in trouble. But the tenderness of sexual union is the bit that makes me awkward. And
But I have a nit to pick about not just these vows, the ring exchange, etc. It's in the wrong order.
It is in the wrong order.
They're doing the rings before the vows. And that's not how it works.
I hope I'm going to save you by saying, in an actual wedding, this would be abhorrent. Lol. But because it's TV, they can't legally marry Emma Chambers and Jane.
Yeah, but she's not a real vicar.
Isn't a vicar.
Yeah, so she won't be able to do it.
No, she is a real vicar. Please don't tell me that.
But
I guess it's because of TV, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
you have to repeat the vows word for word, and that is the kind of you're legally marrying each other at that point, and so you can't fluff it up. So if someone says it wrong, you have to get them to repeat it. And the thing with the rings is really weird as well. And if you were in this circumstance where the rings had been forgotten, but there was a packet of hula hoops, please tell me you wouldn't use the hula hoops.
Of course not.
No.
Just frankly, if she'd done the rehearsal correctly, none of this would have been an issue. No. I always make sure to rehearse the vows with a couple.
But you shouldn't do them all.
No, I don't. I skip kind of the last. I don't do them in completion, but I make sure that the key bits and the bits they'll laugh at are done. I want to talk about this order of this service because I made a note because I am a huge nerd. Their order of service, assuming, and I've been generous that we're seeing segments of this service. We have an opening greeting, an anthem. I would argue this isn't a hymn. Declarations. We only see the addressing the congregation and not the couple addressing each other. But we don't see them giving their consent, but we see the congregation giving theirs. Then we have the rings, and then the vows, and then the sermon. The sermon can come before or after the vows, so that's variable. We don't see a reading. Then the proclamation, without the tying of a knot, without the stole being wrapped around my hands.
Oh, I love that part.
Then
yeah, it's my favourite bit too.
It's fantastic for the rehearsal to say, and now we're tying the knot. Like, anyway. And then we have a closing anthem. We don't have a preface. We don't have the registers, and as I said, we don't have a reading. But again, it's not a legal wedding.
But it's TV.
It's TV.
It would have been boring.
Some of the best bits are missed out.
Yeah.
But I do tend to do the vows and everything right at the beginning, because that's the bit that the couple are most nervous about saying the wrong thing, and then kind of do the sermon and stuff afterwards.
I make them wait.
Do you?
Not on purpose, but yeah, I like to set the scene, build the tension. Do you know what, guys? I cannot wait a single second longer. So, bride, groom, come and join me here. Bring up your father, bring up your best man. Yeah, let's get this done. But I agree. I've heard that done a lot of ways.
For me, I think the declarations are what Hollywood tells us the vows are, because that's the I will moment. Not I do, but I will. Part. I then say, to explain why I'm talking to the couple, and I do this for funerals and baptisms, I say, this is me setting the scene. I'm adding context to what is about to happen. So that's why I do my reflection before the vows. But it's after the declarations.
Yeah, I'm the same.
See, I do the sermon after the vows and all that, just to get it out of the way, so those who are nervous about speaking in front of people are done. And then quite often in my sermon, I'll talk about, you've prepared for this day, you've done all the stuff, everyone's here, you both look beautiful, all this kind of stuff. You said your vows, you got married. So what now?
Yeah.
And then talk about marriage as part of that.
That's really cool. Love that.
But my training incumbent previously did it the other way around. And so would do the sermon before the vows and would talk about it differently in a, this is what marriage is all about. Shall we do it? Let's go do it. And then do the vows. And
ultimately, it's down to what works for you as a priest and what works for the couple and what feels most natural for you, because if you as a priest, as the officiant, feel awkward, everyone will know. But anyway, I've got another completely irrelevant but super geeky thing. I was looking at the scene and I saw that there were some hymn numbers on the board.
Oh my goodness.
We know that they don't sing traditional hymns from a hymn book in this wedding, so I was thinking, what are those hymn numbers? What hymn book are they using, and what could they be? So I cross-referenced a couple of hymn books.
My goodness.
I could be wrong, but the hymn numbers that I picked up from the board were 54, 23, and 39. I looked at two hymn books for this. I looked at Hymns Ancient and Modern, which I thought was the most... that was most likely. I also looked at Mission Praise, because that came out, I think, in 1990, just before this would have been filmed. I also, on my shelf, I have Common Praise and Complete Anglican Hymns. Both of those came out afterwards. Jenny is waving hymns old and new, so maybe Jenny can have a quick look at that, because I didn't have that on my shelf. However, if it was Ancient and Modern, the hymns would have been Thou whom shepherds worshipped hearing, Creator of the starry height, and Angels from the realms of glory. So those all fit. Those all fit together as kind of Advent Christmassy hymns. If it was Mission Praise, they would have been Bind Us Together, Lord, All Things Bright and Beautiful, and As With Gladness Men of Old.
It's got to be that.
Yeah, it's got to be that one.
Well, no. So there was a moment where I thought, if it's a wedding, Bind Us Together, Lord, All Things Bright and Beautiful, that works. But As With Gladness Men of Old, would you have that as a wedding? That's an epiphany hymn.
My question to this would be that actually these hymns were for the Sunday either that's been or that's to come, because they don't sing any of these hymns. They sing it kind of.
But we don't see the full service. Maybe they do.
That's true.
I thought that whatever church they are filming this in, they were filming in Advent, and I think they were using hymns Ancient and Modern. But Jenny, what do you have for hymns what is it? Old and new?
Yeah. So what are the numbers?
54. 54.
Yeah.
Which is?
Be still, my soul. The Lord is at your side.
Be still, my soul. The Lord is at your side. I come as a funeral hymn. Hymn 23.
Hymn 23, which would be Alleluia, Jesus is Lord.
Okay.
And I love him. Christ is risen.
That's lovely, Jenny.
Lovely. And hymn 39.
And then in addition, hymn 39 would be As the Deer Pants of the Water.
And when was that hymn book published?
This hymn book was published in 1996. Which is kind of, is that a bit late?
Oh, I think that's about around the time of that. But it's this church.
Close.
They wouldn't have a brand new hymn book, would they?
I would have been surprised if they had Mission Praise, to be honest.
Would the directors, would they
care? Would they know?
I don't think they would. I'd have just think they would have flapped those numbers.
See, I like I said, I think the church that this is being filmed in, that's the hymns that they had at their last service. And they hadn't cleared the board, and the producers thought, that's good enough. And I think it was filmed in Advent.
Oh, intriguing.
Using hymns, ancient and modern.
I love that.
So from Kate's geeky deliciousness, thank you very much for being our resident nerd. We may tease you, but we appreciate and love you. From that, I would like to, maybe this is a confession, but I'm going to stand by my decision and say that after all the vows and everything that we've heard, we come to the kiss where we say, you may now kiss the bride, which I don't say anymore because it's a bit creepy for the vicar to now tell someone to kiss the bride. But in the rehearsal, I say to them, have a think about how you're going to do your kiss. Because if you just do a little peck, that's going to be awkward for all of us. If you start snogging for 3 minutes, that's going to be even more awkward for all of us. And your photographer's going to want to take pictures. So have a little practice about how you might do your kiss. Now, am I a creepy vicar or am I just giving useful advice?
I think, as a bride-to-be myself, I feel that your advice is very good. It's something that I've not considered, and it's giving me a slightly raised heartbeat that I haven't already thought about this. It is something that you need to decide on and maybe have a little practice. I think that's no bad thing. I think that's good.
Have a little think about how you might do it.
I say in rehearsal and in prep, I give them the option of whether they want to kiss or not.
Yeah.
Most likely they're going to say yes, but it gives them that option to think about it and prompt it. And when I use the language in rehearsal, we revisit and I say, you can kiss here if you like to. And then sometimes they decide to have a bit of a practice. And then on the wedding day itself, I say, you may now kiss, but I don't announce it to everyone. I say it to the couple, kind of sotto voice, slightly quieter.
Oh, that's nice.
Because I'm not microphoned in my small churches. I myself, I'm a bit of a megaphone when I need to be. Anyway, I say it to them slightly quieter and give them the nod, as it were, and then I step back.
Hey guys, you can make out now.
Yeah.
I always say...
Waggle the eyebrows.
I decide with them before if I'm going to say the groom's name, you may now kiss your beautiful bride, or if I say, which some brides love, when I say, okay, and then insert bride's name here, you may kiss your groom. Because some of them are like, I hate how the man has to come first and everything.
Yeah. Hey girl, you go get it.
You go get it.
So they smooch. And the wedding's happened, they're married, and it's glorious. And we head outside the church, and there is quite the carriage waiting there for Alice and Hugo, which at the time looks really gaudy, but has become much more popular. Do you remember Katie Price's wedding to Peter Andre?
Oh my goodness.
She had a big carriage like that, didn't she?
She did. That dates us. That dates us so much, Ruthie. Yeah. How could you do that?
Sorry. But she's got this beautiful carriage, and from it, she's about to throw the bouquet, which I didn't do at my wedding because that bouquet was beautiful and I didn't want someone else to take it. But it has become a tradition thing that whoever catches it is the next to get married.
So I have a theory. A lot of American wedding traditions have kind of seeped over to the UK. Like, I remember at college asking because at the time I'd been consuming a lot of American literature which kept talking about the garter retrieval and the garter throwing, which they do.
That's creepy.
What? And yeah, so
have you not heard about this,
American
Jenny?
weddings,
No.
so the bride throws the bouquet, and then the groom retrieves the garter from underneath the bride's dress and then throws it
in front of everyone.
In front of everyone,
sat on a chair.
Yeah,
groom goes under the dress.
To go get. You're lying. I've never seen
garter with his teeth.
Okay, exposing myself. I first came across this when I read Twilight. Exposing myself. If you,
the films, is it?
I can't. I didn't watch the films.
And then they fling the garter.
Yeah, they fling it. So there's lots of and things like the bridesmaids entering before the bride as well. There's another. That's more
that's
American.
very American.
And when I explain it to my wedding couples, I talk about royal wedding versus Hollywood, and I give them the option.
Yeah, me too.
But so
all of them want bridesmaids first.
Yeah, but the bouquet toss, I feel, is more American. And for me, I've only ever encountered it at the wedding reception.
Yes, definitely. But here, Alice says, I'm going to throw it now, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that she's having Geraldine's having a conversation with Simon, and he's saying, wonder who it'll be. And she goes, you don't go in for all that nonsense, do you? And yet, as soon as Alice throws it, I love this scene. It's like slowed down, heartbeat pulse as the music playing, and Geraldine races forward. We see her pushing people out of the way in order to catch that bouquet. She wants to have that word with Simon that says, looks like it's me. I'm the next bride to be. Who'd have thought it?
As far as I'm aware, the tradition is that the bouquet, you're supposed to keep the flowers and you preserve them and put them on your first child's baptism cake.
Oh, no way! I haven't heard that before.
I heard that. I've heard the one about your wedding cake, the top tier you save for your first child's baptism.
Yeah, I've come across that before.
Is that? Maybe I'm conflating. But yeah, Geraldine kind of throws herself into the fray and pushes people aside.
Yes, and she gets the bouquet.
It's that blurring of lines again, where is she here as the vicar or as the maid of honour?
Well, yeah, she's never established as maid of honour, is she? And when they have the hen do, she's Alice's best friend is on her t-shirt. But yeah, she suddenly, it's not even friend. I think she becomes woman who'd like to be married, and she just goes for it and commits to it, and goes mad to try and get the bouquet. And we go from that scene over to Horton Manor, which is where they seem to be having the wedding reception, and everyone's in the living room having drinks and celebrating the wedding of Alice and Hugo. And Geraldine at this point is, I think we said the phrase, controlled by her ovaries in her decision making for what she does.
Think very rogue here, and it obviously it indicates how much of a fan she is of Simon, because you may remember, if you've seen this episode recently, or perhaps remember it from times gone by, you've seen it. She announces to everybody in the room in this kind of post-wedding party that she's going to be leaving Dibley, and she will accept the bishop's offer and leave for a post in Liverpool so that she can be close to Simon.
Well,
I'm so angry at her.
Yeah. Why does she do it at this point?
Why did she choose it at this point?
She loves him.
She doesn't love him. She loves him.
Yeah, maybe.
She
loves him, and she's lonely.
And she's lonely. But that's just not the process. So, for those of you who don't know, in the Church of England, everything has to be secret until it's officially announced. And you have to keep the big secret of your changing jobs until you get this go-ahead. And so, in fact, if she has had that go-ahead, that means it's finalised. She's had the police checks. She is going to be that vicar, and it's being announced in both parishes at the same time. The fact that she's just gone ahead and then she pulls back later, it's just like...
It's not how it is in real life, but it indicates her absolute infatuation with Simon, and she's like, oh, this is a real goer. Which does surprise me, because they haven't even had a first date.
They haven't even had a proper conversation. Let's be real. They've spent like maybe a few hours in their company in public.
Yeah,
not
it's tough.
in private.
Yeah.
Geraldine, you poor woman. You just you need to have a day out.
All of us in our ministry have announced that we're leaving and going to different places. How did you find that process?
Painful.
Yeah.
It's really upsetting. The first time was I had to switch curacies partway through for health reasons. And it was so upsetting to say I have to leave and I have to go somewhere else. And then when I was moving on to my current job, I didn't actually know at that point where I was going. And I had to say, I don't know where I'm going, but I've got to, my license is expiring. I've got to go. I love you all, and I'm really sad to be leaving you.
Yeah. It's really tough, isn't it? And when I left my last job, I'd been on maternity leave for a long time as well. So I'd missed like a really big chunk with my church community that, they'd had the opportunity to see Benjamin grow in different ways, but it was in the middle of the pandemic as well. So I didn't get like a farewell send off or anything like that, which was really, really sad. And it's a really difficult thing to leave. And you are so emotionally invested in a place, and you have built up relationships with people, not just those who regularly come to church, but those who are wedding couples or funerals or baptisms and just the community as a whole. And then you move on to a different place. And I think it's really important that we do move on. I worry about vicars who are in one place for too long, because I think it can become a lot of vicar-centred as opposed to God-centred.
Well, no. There are some people who are called to one place, and they have the gifting to be able to renew their ministry, and their particular gifting is accompanying those people. And there are some parts of the country who just need that stability. There are communities that need the stability of one person who's travelled with them through the highs and lows.
But what happens when they leave? They've become so reliant on a person who's been there for 20 years or whatever it might be. What's going to happen when they go?
That's a really good question. And I guess my hope would be that if a vicar was there for a long time, they would make it the focus of their mission and ministry to raise up leaders in that church family, in that congregation, so that when the inevitable did happen, they were a stabilising force. But when they did go, they would actually equip and enable leaders in that church family, in that community, to be the people.
Let's go back to Geraldine, because we're stepping on landmines here. Geraldine is interesting because after this moment, I don't think we revisit the idea of Geraldine moving on, except for the comic relief women bishops.
Later on.
The Bishop of Dibley episode. And it's interesting because the question is then, if we were to have a final, this is the very end Vicar of Dibley episode, where Geraldine really is probably retiring at this point, let's be real. She spent essentially her whole ordained ministry in Dibley.
One place.
I personally think, although it's not what would normally happen and not what is encouraged, I think she would retire to Dibley and probably become a house for duty priest there. I imagine. If we're looking at the TV narrative, in real life that wouldn't happen.
That would be such a bad idea.
But the TV narrative, I think that's what would happen. And then maybe you'd have there's a new priest, and it would be a she, is the vicar of 10 of these rural Oxfordshire parishes. And now Geraldine has to compete with this. Anyway, you'd have those storylines if you really were. But yeah, I've thought about this.
I was going to say, I'm entirely lost, but I'm enjoying the creative imagination.
I think it's also an interesting time that Geraldine chooses to announce that she's leaving. And a really bad time to announce that she's leaving in the middle of the wedding reception. And I know that she's doing it to get a reaction from Simon. It's all for TV, but in reality you would not do this. And actually it steals away from Alice and Hugo's moment.
I'm just so glad that she doesn't say this when Alice and Hugo are in a room.
Yeah, it's their time and it's their reception. And actually, when she decides she's not leaving because she hears the news that Simon's actually staying in Dibley, which is complicated for so many reasons, she's about to announce it, but then sees that Hugo and Alice are there in their attire, ready for their honeymoon. And she thinks, oh, now's not the right time, and introduces the new Mr. and Mrs. Horton. In their going away outfits. They come out in snorkels and wetsuits with flippers on and heading off to Barbados, which means that their prize that they won was not their honeymoon for Radio Dibley. So maybe they're going to Barbados via Disneyland Paris, or
maybe they've been and done Disneyland. Maybe that was their engagement moon. Was that a thing in the 90s? Is that a thing now?
Engagement moon.
Engagement moon.
Engagement moon.
They've been and done Paris, I reckon, by this point. Now it's time for the honeymoon, and off they go. And I know I'm possibly racing ahead, but I absolutely love the fact that Owen, Jim, and Frank all place a tiny little firework in the exhaust pipe to cheer the married couple. Yeah. I didn't realise that this was a thing. Apparently, this is why people used to attach tin cans. So it's like a bit of a joke, like a practical joke, like, wait.
Oh, really?
But yeah, it's probably the traditions for newlyweds, isn't it?
I have a confession here. When my brother got married, I perhaps handed over his car keys to some of his male friends in order to decorate the car. And they did quite a lot of decoration to the car. And it smelled of cheesy Wotsits for a long time. And I apologise, Phil. I should not have given your car keys over. But it was very funny. And I had a few Prosecco's at the time.
Very close family friend of mine recounts that when he got married, his best man put a kipper under the bonnet of the car. So as the newlyweds were travelling, the smell of fish grew and grew until they realised something was wrong.
That's gross.
I know, right?
Yes. Lovely. So Alice and Hugo make their departure. And we have this closing scene between Geraldine and Simon. And I'm really thankful because there was a certain point where this felt really creepy on Simon's behalf. Where Geraldine was saying, I'm moving to Liverpool, and she's making eyes at him, and she's dyed her hair for him. And it could have been really creepy, except he reciprocates it. And he says, there's kind of the indication that he's decided to move to Dibley to be closer to her. And my wondering is, do you think that the writers were setting this up to be a potential final episode in terms of things closing and storylines being tied up and a potential happy ending for Geraldine?
You mentioned this theory, and it's an interesting theory if they weren't allowed to do a third season or anything like that they just kind of hinted it and go, what might happen next, and you kind of create the story of your own. But going to the text, it says here in the script, the kind of what's the word? Stage directions. In the text, in the stage directions, it says, watch this space at the end. So I don't think they were intending to finish it then. I think they were perhaps intending for another episode. Yeah. And whether they thought, do you know what? Actually, let's just get Simon and Geraldine together and that'll finish the job. Yeah. Or whether they want to do more with that. But
maybe they were hedging their bets. maybe we won't be commissioned to do more episodes. So if we aren't, this is sort of an okay place to finish, but we've got more ideas.
I think you're right. I think this is a great halfway point. Season 2, close of season 2, great halfway point. We know that Geraldine is looking for somebody lovely in her life. She wants to get married, and we see this exciting dynamic between her and Simon, but it's just not quite right.
It's not right.
Yeah.
It's so wrong. And
it's so sudden.
And the joke that happens, because Alice has gone away, and so at the end of the episode, the joke happens with David Horton instead.
Yeah,
and
that was amusing.
She's so relieved because he immediately gets the joke and she starts explaining it, but he understands it. And it just finishes with the word that we forgot when we did the quiz. He just says, stay. And it's just so beautiful. And it shows what an impact that she's had on that community and how beloved she is by the people there. And that even David, who was so anti her, has said, no, you're right for this community. Stay.
Yeah.
I do have to say, though, going back to what I've said in a previous episode when we did the animal service episode, I feel like there is a little bit of romantic coding happening here.
No!
There's something in the way David looks at her. That stay is so Austen-esque. Of stay, don't leave me.
You need the brother, not the rogue brother.
And it is something that is, I think, is it next season it's explored, or is it or is it a bit after?
Explored. I think it is next. Will become to be explored. So hang on tight, dear listeners, for this is all to come.
To Alice and Hugo.
To Alice and Hugo.
Alice and Hugo.
Woo! And all who sail in them.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Toby for editing our ramblings.
Any views expressed in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily represent those of the Church of England or any other organisations with which we are affiliated.
And as always, bless you for listening.
What do you call two spiders who have got married?
I don't know.
Newlyweds.
Oh,
newlyweds.
That's lovely.
Yay.